Feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at MAYAAkai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. This is episode 13. What a way I've come. Anyways, with that being said, thank you for tuning in. If you are a first-time listener, well, welcome. Buckle up for safety. No, it's always safe here. Safe spaces. If you're a returning listener, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you carving time out of your day to share with me and listening to my episodes. Remember, you can find all former episodes of M.A.Y.A at MAYAAkai.com. It's everything in regards to the show. All 12 and 13 episodes will be there. Remember, there's always a podcast resource section. So if you, have an episode and I tell you there's supplemental things that you can kind of use to kind of help you work through the process, because remember, this is your process. You're working at your own speed. That's rule one of M.A.Y.A, is that though there may be 13 episodes, you listen and work through these episodes at your pace. We're doing this together. So I'm glad to have you here for 13. But if you're still lingering somewhere around 4 or 5, because maybe you need to process something more than in a different episode, it's all right with me, because you can always go to MAYAAkai.com and listen to former episodes. Remember, too, you can always find M.A.Y.A on different podcast platforms. So if you like Google, iTunes, iHeartRadio, just search M.A.Y.A, M.A.Y.A, myambitionyourambition.com, and you can listen to episodes there as well. And hopefully, cross my fingers, I'll be part of Audible soon with Amazon. So you can always go to your podcast platform preference, but if not, feel free. You can always just listen at MAYAAkai.com. And remember always to get social with me. I appreciate that. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, Maya_Akai, and of course, Facebook, M.A.Y.A Kai Presents, which most of you probably do because you're here right now. And thank you for tuning in. So remember, I try to keep it roughly around 45, 50 minutes of quality time with you. It's all about you with M.A.Y.A. So I always say, grab that comfortable space on the couch, summertime, the patio, grab your drink of choice. For me, I'm trying to hydrate. So it's more water, but whether it's coffee, tea, a glass of wine, it's probably that time somewhere. And if it's not, it's your time. So use it as you see fit so that we can connect to really talk about some key conversations. This particular episode for me is something that's personal because it popped out in a conversation I was having with someone, and it's clear to me. But then I said to myself, well, what happens if it isn't exactly obvious to everybody else? So episode 13, change versus progress, knowing the difference. Now, really quickly, alert. As you know, I have something called Your Toolbox, which goes back to over a year ago when I did a show called Break Up With Them to Make Up With You. It was all about reconnecting with yourself and being willing to focus purely on you and your relationship with yourself, which this show is built upon. And sometimes you might have to break up with other people or put them in time out on the corner to be able to achieve that. And one of the concepts I used in that show was called Your Personal Toolbox. So during shows, I say this is something that you need to put into your personal toolbox because it's something that you're going to be using through this journey of getting to the best version of yourself. Because remember, everything about M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, is getting to the best version of yourself. So alert, this is a toolbox episode. These are working concepts that are going to help you to succeed when working on the best version of yourself. Just FYI. So before we jump into episode 13, let's recap episode 12. Because episode 13, as most of my episodes do, build upon each other, but it doesn't mean they don't function independently. I just think they work better because they're tied in. So remember, if you want to interact with the show, when you make a comment in the comment section, it'll kind of alert me and I will include your comments into the show. I like when people share their insight or personal experiences because I don't feel just because I happen to be a counselor, a mental health counselor, this makes me the expert. Because I always say my journey is a thing I like to share with others. And people can often share some type of salient information or an experience they had. And people will look at it and say, hey, I've been there. Let me share this with you. And people have shared a lot of input from the podcast, and it kind of helps me to find new topics and ways to try to connect with people. So I appreciate everyone who takes time, one, to listen. Thank you for the comment. See, this is how it works. You type a comment, I put it on the screen. It works just like that. Thank you, Lee Williams, for tuning in. So with that being said, I want to kind of backtrack just a small bit and talk briefly about episode 12. We talked about what that best version of you entails, because everything I said about this show is about achieving the best version of you. And that means looking at those domains: mental, emotional, financial, physical, and spiritual. What did I say last week about that? I am not one to push religion or spirituality on anyone. This is the best version of you. So if that works for you, then you incorporate it. If it doesn't, it's not for me to judge, nor is it for anyone else. I always explain to people that I'm a practicing Buddhist, which, by the way, is not religion, it's philosophy. After being a Roman Catholic most of my life and even having Mass in Latin, I found the Catholicism, which I figured out, honestly, when I was at least 13 or 14 years old. I felt Catholicism did not resonate with me. And I had lots of questions, and you weren't supposed to ask those questions. So eventually I became a non-practicing Catholic. Can't say I identify with it, but I'm big into spirituality. So when someone introduced me to Buddhism, which is a philosophy about elevating self, mind, heart, body, I was like, just in doing this, when you're a better person in this state, using this philosophy, you can't help but be an asset to the world. Real talk. I'm not pushing Buddhism on anybody, because people always think it's that fat guy, right? It's a very interesting philosophy. Grab a book, check it out. You might be really surprised about many of the principles of Buddhism. It's for everyday living, can help you to navigate a lot of rough waters, so to speak. But with that being said, so I wanted to add that piece about spirituality, because I don't want people to feel like it's a must-have, I gotta be spiritual. That's not what it's about. That's why I like to make sure doesn't say it, but I add it because I do believe that it could be something that can be very complementary in the process, so to speak. So in episode 12, what goes into the best version of you? The key thing was we talked about, designing your blueprint and what's required, like what elements do you need to build that best version of yourself? And this is when I said, hey guys, open up your personal toolbox, because I need you to pull out that emotional intelligence piece that we talked about. And remember emotional intelligence, which I'm going to probably beat overhead like all the time, because I need for people to really embrace it, learn it, and begin to learn to want to master it, is the ability to perceive, control, and evaluate emotions, not just yours, but those of others. Because when you can interpret emotions, remember we talked about that. One of my favorite sayings is that where your focus goes, your energy will follow. So if you're focused on all the wrong stuff, negative people, negative stuff at work, negative stuff with your friends, negative stuff with your significant other, if you think for some reason within your life, the scope of your life is going to be not negative, I'd ask you why you think that, because your whole focus is negative, and hence that energy, you become immersed in it. So emotional intelligence helps you to be able to say, I think I'm perceiving something here. I think this is negative. Well, wait a minute. When this person does this, it makes me act this way. I need to control that, because that emotion is driving how I think and how I act. That's evaluating. Emotional intelligence is, like I said, one of the most important things tools to have in your toolbox. So hence, it was revisited in 12. Take it out again for episode 13, because we're going to add a couple more. And I think once we add in understanding change and progress into it, when you put these tools out your toolbox, I think you'll see a lot of things change for you, if nothing else, on perception of how you see the world. So make sure you take out your emotional intelligence and sit it on the table and look at it and say, okay, I'm going to be using this today. All right. So in episode 12, designing the best version of yourself, what's entailed in it, we talked about as you evolve as a person. And remember I mentioned that who you are at 20 is not who you are at 30, is not who you are at 40, on and so forth, because life experiences will tend to shape and change you in ways. That word change, we're going to learn a lot about that word change and what it really means. And so one of the things that was key and discussed was another toolbox thing, is that as you are evolving and becoming the person that you so desire to be, keep notes or copies of your old self or areas you improve in, so you never lose sight of where you are and where you came from. So if you start to regress, you'll say, oh, I wasn't trying to take that out. That needs to go back. Why am I doing this? That's the old me. So being the new version of yourself doesn't mean that all of a sudden you stop being who you are. You've improved upon it. Like we talked about the example of cars. Every year, car models allegedly get improved, and they're usually small improvements, but it tends to be the same car until they do a big body style change. But generally speaking, it's more of the features and benefits of vehicles that draw us in. So think of yourself as that What is that perfect drive? What kind of car do I want to be? And why? Because that'll tell you a lot about why you seek to be a certain way. So toolbox stuff. All the changes that you're making along the way to improve yourself, you are not to discard of those memories, thoughts, and experiences. You are to keep them tucked away, to be a subtle reminder of where you came from and where you're going. So that was one of the key notes. And then also within the respective, talking about the blueprint, what it entails, we had 10 elements of design for the best version of yourself that we talked about. The ultimate objective in episode 12 in designing the best version of you was to be yourself, to have courage, have confidence, and take calculated risk to improve yourself daily. Remember, it's the little things. Anyway, song by Bush. Remember, my non-singing self likes to sing. And so with that being said, that's Little Things by Bush. It's the little things that kill, but it's also the little things that can build. So remember, we're building. We've got building blocks to getting towards you. I don't want sweeping big, changes. I'm looking for this to be more continuous and fluid, more like we're walking down a path, more so than stepping up stairs. But occasionally, a stair might appear. You might come to a stairway and say, which way am I going with this? Should I be going up? And is up the right direction? We always assume that going up is the right thing to do. Is it? It's about perception. All right. So that in a nutshell was episode 12, which of course, by the way, you can always go to myakai.com. Here comes some shameless self-promotion, and listen to all 12 episodes, as well as go to the podcast resource section. And you can read some additional things that I will share that I think can help you kind of get some additional perspective. But of course, if you have your podcast platform of preference, not one for me to tell you not to go to iTunes, Google, or iHeartRadio, you can search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and listen to episodes there as well. And if I am so blessed by the universe, perhaps I will be on Amazon Audible soon as well. So that's how you can listen to previous episodes. So let's get into talking about episode 13. Hard to believe in some way that I've come this far with 13 episodes. It talks about change versus progress, knowing the difference. And it's interesting because often people think they're synonymous. So before I jump into this, I want to share something that's really important. Challenges ahead. I feel it's incumbent that I always keep people on their toes and say that when something changes, it's a challenge usually whether you want it or not. So this is going to be a toolbox piece right here. Know what challenge is. Most people are like, oh, I know what challenge is because I've been there, done that, and been dealing with obstacles and challenges. I feel like my whole damn life. In fact, I like to have a vacation from challenge. Well, as those sayings I like to steal from people, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. But the question is, what does that change look like? That's the thing about this episode, which is so important to me, is I'm going to say something's going to challenge you, but I need you to understand what the functionality of challenge actually is. Most people are like, I don't want it to have any because I don't want to do it. I know. Oh, I'm sorry. And thank you for everyone tuning in. Yes, I do have a YouTube channel. You can watch this on YouTube as well. I will make sure I share that so people can know you can go to YouTube and you can watch it as well. But you know what that means, Marcus Rogers? I want you to go to myakai.com and you can click and it'll take you to the YouTube page. That's how that works. But yes, there is a YouTube page as well for the episodes. So know what challenge is. This is one of the things. We're putting 3 things in your toolbox today. Understanding change and the difference from progress, understanding progress, and putting challenge into perspective. These are the 3 things we're putting into your toolbox because we took emotional intelligence out today because we're using it. And we're going to add some things to it. All right. So let's quickly, loosely define challenge. If we give challenge and talk about it in its literal meaning, it's an objection or query of truth of something. It often is implicit demand of proof. It disputes truth or validity of something. That's literally what challenge is. Challenge means I'm going to stand forth in front of you, and there's something here that isn't right. One of these things does not belong here. Remember that? That's 2. I got 2 songs in. And it demands proof of something. This is a little dictionary meaning of what challenge is. Now, mind you, now that you know what the literal meaning is and not so much what the maybe emotional meaning is, Do you see challenge differently? Because a lot of people don't. They feel like challenge is meant to be something that absolutely is meant to be difficult for me. Notice within those distinct literal meanings, it never described challenge as necessarily being difficult. It's how we choose to, here comes emotional intelligence, perceive, interpret, and control how we respond to what the challenge is. So most people assume that challenge is supposed to be difficult when maybe all it's doing is demanding proof or disputing something. The question is, are you comfortable with what it's disputing? Because is it disputing you? Is it disputing something or asking for validity about something that matters, you care about? So hence you take a negative stance on it because you don't like where it's pushing you. This is when you use emotional intelligence to step back and say, okay, let me interpret why I'm feeling like this about this. What is it challenging about me? And why does that bother me so much? Challenging. So I like this comment from Lee Williams. He says, challenging yourself or from others. How about both? How about both? Because unless you live in a silo, almost everything in life is going to be impacted by the interaction of others. So when you talk about challenge, Lee, and thank you for presenting that question, it very well does mean that you could be challenging yourself on something, but you also might be being challenged by others. So let's be honest. Let's say at work, you might be getting challenged by your boss about something you're working on project-wise. Can you accomplish the project? And let's put this in perspective. Let's say, at work, you have a boss who's demanding and challenges you and others. And sometimes a person will be like, I feel like my boss just picks on me. I would tell you, step back and do me a favor. Let's put on our emotional intelligence hat and let's look at why we think your boss might be challenging you. Now, mind you, could it be that your boss is just an arse? Maybe. Does your boss treat everyone like that? Like they're not good enough, their work isn't good enough? Because now that means emotional intelligence allows you to evaluate how others respond to you, and if that response has anything really to do with you, or is it really just about them? See, this is where the emotional intelligence piece is so important, to be able to evaluate that and say, well, my boss is kind of mean to me, but wait, he's kind of mean to everybody. But to be honest, I'm on time, I do my work, and I always do more work than necessary and go above and beyond. So the question is it really about you, or is it about your boss? See, this is where you have to learn to be able to interpret and evaluate and then control how you respond. Do you get frustrated because you're like, I do my best and I feel like it's never good enough? Well, see, here's where you step back within that best version of you. And if you've done your best, then it is good enough. And if it's not good enough for your boss, then the question is, how can it be better? And is it even within your scope to do it? That's where that communication piece comes in. Remember back in episode, 9 or 10, we talked about communication styles and being able to express that, to say to your boss, hey, can I talk to you? Because remember, how you talk to people, it totally matters. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And it's being able to go to your boss and to say, I really want to talk to you about this project. So this is what the project is. Here are the goals. Here's how I plan on tackling this. What do you think? Is there something I can do differently? Or is there a specific way you want this done? Because I want to make sure I get this right. You'd be surprised sometimes you may get a response because they're in that position of control and they may like the fact that you are conferring with them about how you're going to approach something. But the more important thing is the objective, because remember, objectivity is huge in this, is making sure that you get them what they need and be done with it. And not let your emotions of, I never feel good enough. Well, you probably are more than good enough. It's just you're dealing with a person who probably isn't the best manager in the world. Maybe they're insecure. So that's the thing about emotional intelligence. It helps you to evaluate other people and to make sure it's not really me, it's them, because I slayed that. So what? Now that's not good enough? But don't say it like that. Because remember, if you say it like that, like I slayed it, now why is that not good enough? And if you say it the way I looked, it's going to be an instant turn off. Opposed to you say, I felt like I kind of hit this on points. Here were the goals. I did this, this, and this, and we accomplished it. Is there something I could have done different, or did you want something different from me? Communication is key. The people in life who excel are the people who are not afraid to have the hard or challenging conversations. So just remember, challenging doesn't have to be bad or difficult. It means there's something here that's being questioned for validity. So don't make it a negative thing. Look at it as, if it's asking something different of me, why, and can I do it? That's what challenge means. Like, oh, okay. So This is why it was important for us to have a little small moment and talk about challenging, in your toolbox to make sure there's a clear understanding of it. So remember that when we talk about challenge, it has a place in this conversation. So let's talk about change and progress. First of all, before I jump into defining change, let's do this first. Change and progress are not the same, though often people look at them as being synonymous. The word gets interchanged all the time. Oh, there was a change. Oh, that's progress. They're two different things. And the reason I felt this was a key conversation to have right now is because when you're working towards the best version of yourself, you have to know the difference and not confuse them. Because change can be one thing, but it doesn't mean it took you to where you need to be, which is supposed to be progress. Just know that. Change could be linear, whereas it also can move backwards, where progress is only about moving forwards. So let's talk about defining things. So when we define change, this is one of those literal meanings, dictionary, so to speak. It makes someone or something different. It alters or modifies, replaces something with something else, especially something of the same kind that is newer or better. That within itself as a definition is not wholly true, because change can happen and it doesn't mean that it was necessarily for the best, because sometimes change cannot be for the best. And this is exactly why I wanted to make the difference between progress and change known. Because let's just say a physical change. Let's say a person's sick and they lost a lot of weight. That's not a good change, but it's a change that unfortunately happened. They would look at you and say, didn't happen for a good reason. So that's not good change. So there is good change and there is bad change. This is why I wanted to make sure there was a clear understanding of the two. Because as you work towards the best version of yourself, it's imperative to me that you understand the difference. Now, when you talk about progress is purely about forward movement, onward movement towards a destination or a goal. That means where you are trying to go is moving towards a path of progress. It is forward, and forward should always be good. If you're moving forward and it's forth into something bad, that speaks volumes about your situation, and you need to pump all brakes and you need to pull all stops out and figure out, whoa, why am I going this direction? Because direction is important. Forwards, lateral, backwards, all matters. But forward using that is positive. So progress is in terms of positive. Change as a standalone. It's not of yourself. I want you to understand that don't change if it's change. So let's put this in overview. And I'd like to kind of jump in and give background on change. So social change happened, and we can put the kind of something what you think. It's interesting because change is never stagnant. It has to always move. So let's talk about where we're at now. Let's go back and talk about for the Me Too. It's interesting. Most people's minds after women's right, equal right, that movement, they felt that women changed. Women started changing in society, getting out of the home, more educated, being independent. That changed. Progress. And this is what I want you to understand about change and progress. It never should be stagnant. There's always room for growth. And this is that best version of you. You're going to keep mental notes of you change, because every evolution that you go through, you do something good, you keep playing. So what's the next step? There might be something more coming. So the thing about even progress is it's never stagnant. Neither is change. So all of a sudden we have Me Too movement, and most people realize and then what are they possibly complaining about? Women can do anything. Women are like one of those protected populations, demographics. But yet, there was still room after all the years of progress and change. There was now time for another movement. Another change needed to happen to move forward and to talk about inequalities in regards to pay. After a change had occurred. So no, every time you get to a version of yourself that's better, you're going to notice something about you that can be better. Now remember, what do I always say? We're striving for great. Good is the enemy of great, because good usually means comfort. And every now and then I want you to get a little uncomfortable with things so you can make sure that you're in a good space. Now, if you're happy where you are, I'm going to tell you that don't question it. go with it. But if you're not, but you're just like too lazy or you don't want to commit to doing the work, well, that's another story. So the Me Too movement was an example of how you could see change that had progress, and then stagnation kind of came in, and all the underlying issues that came along resurfaced, and a new movement had to happen, hence Me Too. Let's talk about, this is one that's so elaborate. I don't even think how much time is left in the show. I can't get too in depth because we could be here forever. You talk about social change. So you look specifically like at the plight of African Americans, which is so elaborate and so complicated that I would tell you, as a person of color, legitimately, it's been all about change and very limited progress. I will tell you that when I put the two in perspective. A lot of change happened along the way socially because it was forced. Sometimes changes happen because it's forced. I always say progress often is a residual effect of change, but it tends to be more embraced. And when progress happens, to me, it is more legitimate and embraced than just change. Sometimes things change, but a lot of people don't embrace it, which means the change is limited. So, for instance, you talk about slavery ended not because often people thought it was the kindness of their hearts. There was a political and economic motive behind slavery ending, okay? Because the clear message, if it was really about equality and understanding and accepting that there has been this injustice towards this group of people, not only are we going to free them, but we're going to make sure they have equal access to education, healthcare, wealth, the whole 9 yards. But it didn't. Instead, we went from just being separated by freedom to being separated by economic, social spaces, so to speak. And then we looked at years and decades of how change that we allegedly thought was good has been nothing but minimal change. It became law. So now you're seeing where this change about equality is still being questioned. Like, well, why is it that people still live in poverty? Or why is it that there's not equal education opportunities or healthcare or jobs? Because we're still dealing with racism, because people's mindsets really didn't progress to understanding it was wrong. It only changed because they were forced to think differently, or to show they were forced to think differently. That's the interesting about change. So hopefully you can see the correlation with that piece, that just because something changes doesn't mean that progress has happened. And what you're seeing right now in our current society in regards to the racial unrest, this has always been there because there wasn't real progress necessarily. It was change that had to happen, but it was forced change. And when you force things, which means when you're working towards the best version of yourself, if you're not embracing this because it's something you truly seek to make yourself better, then it will not be authentic. It will not be real. It means the kind of success you're seeking to get to your happiness may not necessarily occur. So whenever you seek to make the best version of yourself, you must be absolutely 100% committed to what you're doing. Because if you're not, the outcomes won't be what you think. So we define the difference between change and progress. Here's the other part that I would want you to think about when we talk about where this is supposed to go. If you want to figure out where you are in the best version of yourself and to know where you're sitting with change or progress, it's important that you give yourself measurement tools. We measure a lot of things to make sure that they're viable. We look at how financially, if things are in the red or in the black. Okay, when it comes to your happiness and success, you should be measuring a lot of things the exact same way. Not necessarily red and black, but where you are with achieving certain things. So when we talk about measurement, it's important that you have benchmarks to help you gauge your goals. Like, remember I told you, before you can even get to the best version of yourself, you need to figure out where you feel deficient and what you like to see change. And that blueprint is how I can change those things, which means that then you're goal setting. So you're saying, okay, so let's take a financial goal. You can say, I really want to pay off my debt because I maybe want to buy a house. I want to get my student loans under control. Those are goals. So once you set those goals, then you put together how you're going to do it. So it might be I'm paying this much continually. Maybe I'm going to debt consolidate, whatever the case may be, so that you can achieve getting rid of your debt. You put a goal in it. So what's key about that? So how would you know it improved? Because eventually your debt gets reduced and all of a sudden you may see your credit score increase because you've put a plan in place that when you lower your debt, because remember, part of the credit score thing is that they look at your debt to income ratio. And if you have a lot of first of all, if you have a lot of open credit, and your balances are like more than 33% of what you actually could have available, that kills your credit score. Not that you need to know that, but maybe you do. Because most people don't understand how to fix their credit. There's a method to the madness, because even those people who are monitoring your credit, guess what they have? Measurement. So it's no different when you talk about getting to the best version of yourself. So what you have to ask yourself when you set those goals is, once you set your goals, and you should be checking your temperature periodically to see how things are going. So if you say in 6 months, I want this to be paid off, I want that to be paid off, then you can look in 6 months and say, this is improved because I achieved that goal. But most importantly, is when you talk about change versus progress, there's a difference between now and later. And I don't mean those little candies that people don't actually call now and later, which is funny. Someone posted a Facebook meme about that, and I got a kick out of it, but it's true, because we don't say now and later, they say now and later. But either way, when you are talking about gauging where you are with changes that you're making in your life, whether it's emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, whatever, the measurement piece is key. But just know that there's a now versus a later in everything. So some of the things that you may set up that you achieve now may turn into long-term laters that have greater value for you. So here's food for thought about the measurement piece. The now might be the change, and the later might be the progress, if that makes any sense. Because changes, though they may be small and incremental, remember, little things, could lead to bigger things. So what you have to ask yourself is, the challenge I'm experiencing right now may not be huge. It may not be sweeping. But it may actually matriculate into progress a little later down the road. Because if all your efforts towards change are the movements forward, and they're positive and not negative, and you're not stagnant, then eventually you will see progress in whatever it is the goal you set for yourself. So let's say if it's small things now, so I have to sacrifice this now, and it's a change in something for me, but down the road you see the outcome, and that's progress. So understand that change should lead to progress, but they're never synonymously the same thing, and that's what people assume. And this is why I needed you to understand this and working towards the best version of yourself. That change is not always good. And here's another thing that might kind of ruffle your feathers. Okay? I'm going to say it. You might have to make a change now that's uncomfortable. We talked about challenge earlier. You might have to make a change to get to that best version of yourself that's really uncomfortable. Let's say physically. Let's just say you want to lose weight. Losing weight is not easy. That's why most of us fail at it. Me included, even though my last current installment has been very successful, because I realized the change I had to make to see the progress that I have meant giving up a whole lot of stuff and being uncomfortable, which means being more mindful of what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, giving up things that I like. And it was uncomfortable, but it was change, because sometimes you can make changes, by the way, that are not necessarily good for you. I'm gonna give you an example. People often will go on fad diets, and they seem like a great idea. But now what you have found by a lot of research and data is that fad diets are not good, because often you gain back what you lost and then some, because you're not really doing a mindset. You're not changing your lifestyle that then's going to help you maintain the goal that you want. You're doing something for instant gratification. And often instant gratification usually gives us some form of change, but it's only momentary. See, that's the thing about change. Change is always in flux, so to speak. And because change is always good, bad, sometimes indifferent, you have to be careful how you embrace change. Like I said, all change isn't good. And you have to have the emotional intelligence, remember that's out your toolbox on the table, to know that it's not. But also to know, just because change might be uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's bad. See, that's the thing about change. The thing about progress is all the hard work and heavy lifting has been done to make that change, that shift towards your goal happen, to see the progress. It's the change that's inconvenient, that's uncomfortable, sometimes that's inconvenient, that leads to progress. I remember my grandma used to say, may she rest in peace, anything worth having doesn't come easy. She also said everything that glitters not gold. And I agree with her on that. And I learned that through process of elimination, through a lot of life experiences. So the thing about change is, we talked about challenge earlier, and challenge isn't necessarily bad, it's your perception. So change is the same thing. Emotional intelligence, it's about evaluating interpreting and then controlling how you choose to respond. What was the other thing we threw in our toolbox last week? We talked about becoming those people who respond versus react to situations, which means something happens and you don't let that emotion just creep up, take over, and you react. And then you sometimes often regret what you've done. You're like, nah, that's not the way I was supposed to do that. Now I got to go back and clean up my dirty work and I got to apologize. And then somebody's pissy with you and they're just like, you know what? But you said that. You called me a bitch. So you must think that's what I am. Well, in real truth, let's own this, people. Let's own it. When we say nasty things to people when we're mad, we mean it. We mean it when we say it in the moment. I think you are the worst person I've ever met. You're selfish. And believe it, we are allowing how we feel to come out and to say it. And though it's always important to say what you feel, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And then you got to backtrack and apologize. And I've told people flat out, like, look, real talk, that is what you think of me. You let me know. I appreciate you apologizing. No, it's okay. Don't look. If that's how you feel about me, I don't know if I've done something to elicit that emotion from you. It may not just be me. It might just be situations that have led you to feel this way. And I might be the person who's the brunt of your anger. Maybe, but when you said it to me, you at least meant it for a hot 10 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe 5, maybe an hour. But I'll give you credit for at least realizing that it might have been hurtful or wrong. So, and when we react to things, we are allowing ourselves to purge. We are purging. Seriously, we are purging what we feel. We are sharing what we feel. But the problem is it makes a messy situation. Oh, Lee Williams, response versus reaction. LOL, the Capricorn way. Well, Capricorns, stubborn. That would be another show. I'm very much into astrology. We could have conversations about your zodiac sign and how that kind of plays into your personality well, if you're interested. I'd even bring on someone who could help and talk about it. It's interesting. There's a little truth in it. It's fun. It'd be a little fun, lightheartedness. But legitimately, when we react to people, we are allowing our emotions to get the best of us. And I'm hoping for everyone, what you're seeking to achieve in the best version of yourself is to have more autonomy and control of your feelings and to not let them drive you. Remember, as your focus goes, your energy follows. And I want you to learn to control your focus so that your energy flows in a better way. And that's when you get to the best version of yourself. The day you find yourself catching you from having a negative conversation with somebody, you'll feel it. You'll be like, you know something? You'll be looking at them and all of a sudden it'll be like the most uncanny feeling that they haven't elicited from you a negative response when in the past it hasn't, because you have better emotional intelligence. When you have that first aha moment, you will fully appreciate it and you will want to duplicate it. So just know the now might be the change and the later might be the progress that comes from being willing to be uncomfortable, being willing to relinquish a certain amount of control, being willing to accept that everything in the world can't be convenient. Right now, this is why people are struggling with the pandemic. I told you the 3 C's. Comfort, control, and convenience has absolutely been negated and people hate it. They hate it. But I was like, but you've now been challenged, not because it's you personally. It's just this little virus called COVID-19 has thrown an absolute monkey wrench into the program. The question is, how are you going to look at the challenge? It isn't personal, though it feels personal because it's definitely upended a lot of people's lives. I get that piece. But what do you do with it? And the people who think outside the box with COVID-19, I've known people who have literally reaped the benefits of it. Like they've thrived, not survived, they've thrived, made money. But it's their perception. If I was to bring them on, I'm going to start doing shows where I bring on guests and they start talking to you, how they dealt with their challenges and how they turned lemon into lemonade, so to speak. You'll be like, you know what? If I felt like that, I had a couple situations where I probably could have done something a little different. Because it all starts on how you perceive things, how you consider and you think about things, and then not letting your emotions to drive you. So reacting, we want to become people who respond, which means something happens. You know what? This can be like a Sherlock Holmes moment for those of us who've seen Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. in it, how he stops in his mind and he watches the whole scenario play out, right? And then all of a sudden he comes back to reality and it plays out exactly the way he thinks. He's planned it out in his head. This is how I want people to kind of start to live negative situations. I also want you to know, here's another one that's going to come along. There will be risk ahead in this. Because whenever we talk about being able to deal with change and challenge and obstacles, we have to be ready for the idea that there are risks ahead. There's always risk in anything worth having. Now, be mindful in your risk. They should be calculated. Remember, we talked about that. Don't just do things from the seat of your pants just because. Make sure if you take a risk, it yields a benefit from it. There's an outcome that's advantageous for you. If you keep yielding benefits that only other people benefit from, I'm asking when you're going to stop. And please don't do that. But it's for my kids, and it's for my, it's for my significant other. You know what? The thing that makes me just absolutely disgusted, and this is coming from a person who's absolutely only child, spoiled to high heaven. I get so discouraged when I have clients that I talk to who will spend all the money they have so their kid can have the best Christmas. Now, though I respect that, and mind, I'm talking about a kid who's 5. So let me see. You might lose your place to stay, may not have no electricity, maybe can't buy food for a holiday that's manufactured. Because I understand you want your child to feel special and loved, but what people fail to understand, you can do that in different ways. And you should be doing it 365. So if you can't do it for one day of the year, your child should know you love them without you ever spending a dime, because what you can't put a price tag on is true affection and love. And I'm going to tell you something. That's the same conversation in any relationship you have. If the only value people see in you is what you give to them, and it has to be a materialistic thing that's not an intangible, I'd ask you to think about those relationships. Like they're driven by something that's predicated on things that have a materialistic value. So do they actually value you or what you give to them? And if that's what you're raising your kids to be like, well, what kind of adults do you think you will be? What kind of people will they seek in their lives? I don't know. It's a lot to think about. I'm not trying to be negative about Christmas or anything, but just saying. I know people like that. I'm like, so you just used your rent money. And so now y'all might be out come January. That's not thinking smart. There's different ways to approach things. And there's also different resources as well. But just remember, there's risk in everything that you do. Just make sure you're making the right risk, that it's not something that's going to compromise you, who you are at the core of your being. If you're doing things that compromise you, then you might not want to do them. But if it's something that makes you step outside your comfort zone, remember this, comfort zone and compromising, 2 different things. That might be a whole nother show. Comfort zones, understanding what that looks like and how to navigate yours, so that though you may be stepping out of the area where you feel comfortable, it doesn't mean that you have to be a fish out of water. It means learning to navigate different situations that you're not accustomed to. If you can be a chameleon, the art of change is something that's amazing to me. The one thing I can honestly say that I have as a good personality trait is I am really a fish out of water. You could put me in the middle of the room and there could be nobody like me, and I'm still going to be doing me and being okay with it. I don't get uncomfortable very easily. Seriously. And I think that's a wonderful personality trait to have, and I've worked on that. And I have to give credit to my mom for making me like that, because my mother used to make me do stuff that I hated when I was a kid. I'm like, for instance, when I was a kid, I took dance for like 10 years. Love dance. Everybody who knows me, I'll be that 80-year-old woman in one of those weird Facebook videos dancing. That's going to be me, because dance is like therapeutic for me. I salsa dance. I do all kinds of dancing. When I was a kid, she made me audition for the Nutcracker. Okay, because I took ballet, which wasn't my favorite, but it was okay. I will say I walked into the room, and I was always one of those kids that was never the thinnest. I've always been bigger than my peers, so to speak. Not necessarily fat, just I was muscular. So I walked in, I remember walking in, looking at all these really skinny girls. A majority happened to be white. There was 2 actually black girls there who I knew also took dance, but they were all very tall and slender. So they worked, and actually they made the Nutcracker. So I auditioned and actually did a really good job, but I didn't make it. And I'm pretty sure I didn't make it because I didn't quite fit the bill, to be honest. Not that I wasn't a good dancer. So I come out, I didn't make the cut. Well, she's like, well, how do you think you did? And I was like, I thought I did really good. She's like, okay. She goes, well, as long as you think you did good. She goes, then why do you think you didn't make it? I said, because I don't think they was looking for me. That's why. And she was like, well, how does that make you feel? Like, she did this whole like therapy piece with me. By the way, my mother also works in mental health. And I was like, just under the impression that they really weren't looking for people of color. Or I probably said black people back then. And I was like, but hey, so-and-so and so-and-so made it. But I kind of feel like they were a good fit. That was a lesson. She taught me how to thrive in uncomfortable situations and how not to think that it was me, and how to think doesn't mean I was right or wrong, though I think I was pretty spot on with the situation either way. So she taught me how to be able to step out my comfort zone and to challenge myself when I was even being challenged by others, but to see the value and my performance And from there on forward, I never really had a problem speaking in front of people. My mother always put me in those situations where I have to interact with all kinds of people, do speaking things. She thought that was important to be able to like build that part of my personality. And I'm glad she did it, because as a kid, I mean, that's usually something that you don't experience. And I always challenge people, like, give your kids opportunities to really test the waters about what they like and dislike, and put them in uncomfortable things sometimes, because the world will put you in uncomfortable situations. And the question is, what will you do? What will you do when they do it? I always say, we're supposed to help children be the early architects of their existence, which means give them experiences and situations that normally maybe wouldn't come their way. But when they do have something that does, how do we help them to interpret? What's the next part of emotional intelligence? How do we help them to interpret it? How do we help them to, respond and control? And yes, hi, Sylvia Holloway, you're right. Seeing your value. And that was the thing about, I give my mom so much praise for, is that she always helped me to see my value. So when I meet or have, clients that later in life are struggling with their value, I do realize that's why you can go back to my episode 4 or 5 about your attachment styles. I will tell you something, a lot of how your parents nurtured you and put you forth into the world influenced how you saw things. It doesn't mean if you struggle with certain things that you can't change, because you can. Do you want to see the progress that you seek and that best version of yourself? So, some wrap-up thoughts for this episode as we close up. If you feel stagnant, ask why. Then ask, what can you do to change it? And is that change going to be uncomfortable? Is it going to be inconvenient? And if it is, does it have risk? But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, do you achieve the outcome that you're seeking? Happiness, some type of reward. You get the progress. Is it worth the effort you put into it, because it gives you a sense of fulfillment? We don't have to be stagnant. We choose to be stagnant. And we often create excuses for why we're stagnant. I always say, focus on what you can change and not what you can't. But people tend to do the opposite. They want to focus on what they can't change and not what they can. And that becomes the crutch they use to never move forward in life. Never accept mediocrity if that's not what you seek. You can always build a better you. And if you've been listening to all these episodes, I've been giving you all these little nuggets and tools on how you can do it. So everyone, thank you for tuning into episode 13 of M.A.Y.A. My Ambition, Your Ambition. Share, give me feedback of what you think about it. And remember, you can always listen to former episodes of M.A.Y.A. at myakai.com. Remember, there's companion episodes. There's resources. So what I'm going to do is post some stories about challenge and change that people shared. This is a more personal experience that people shared this time for resources. So you can read through perspective on things. But also remember, if you don't want to go to myakai.com to listen to the other 12, now it'll be 13 episodes. If you have a podcast platform of choice, feel free to use it. You can always find me on, iTunes, Google Play, as well as iHeart, and cross my fingers, hopefully Audible's on Amazon soon as well. And remember, always get social with me. I appreciate that. So you can always find me on Instagram and Twitter at Maya_Akai, Facebook Maya Akai Presents. Share the episodes. Give me your feedback. I love hearing what people think about what I'm doing. If there's something you'd like to hear more about, if you've got a question about something, like if I sparked a thought and you're like, I wonder how Maya would she think about this? Let me know. I'd like to share it, because often when people share their ideas, amazing things happen, and you may help someone else who's having the exact same struggle. So don't be afraid to share what you're thinking about things. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I will see you obviously next week. I'm so inconsistent when I'm going to be here. I'm kind of starting to like my Fridays and Saturdays. But either way, you can always find my episodes on myakai.com. Until then, everybody, enjoy your weekend. Be safe. And I will see you next week.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A. Akai and the M.A.Y.A. My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A. on Twitter and Instagram at Maya_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A. Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A. at myakai.com.